Okay, let's get into this. We're doing a deep dive today into a really, well, a pretty provocative idea, actually.
Yeah, it definitely pushes back on a lot of the negativity you hear.
Exactly. It's this concept of the rational optimist. And we're looking at it through the lens of Matt Ridley's book, The Rational Optimist.
It's the one. Now, we're not tackling the whole huge book itself today. Thankfully, we have this great analysis of it, which is our main source material here.
Right. It helps us cut to the core.
It does. And Ridley's central challenge, as this analysis really lays out, is basically a direct counter to all that pessimism about where humanity is heading.
Okay, so our mission today, using this analysis as our guide, is to unpack his main arguments, look at the evidence he pulls together.
And crucially, also get into the criticisms, the nuances that the analysis brings up.
Absolutely. We want to help you get a real handle on Ridley's, let's say, hopeful view, but also see where it maybe faces some tough questions.
Okay, so where does he even start building this optimistic case? The analysis highlights his main thesis, which is, well, it's not just about tech.
Not just inventions.
No, not solely. He argues human progress is really driven by something deeper, something he calls cultural evolution.
Cultural evolution.
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds a bit academic. What does he actually mean by that? How does it work?
Yeah, it sounds high level, but the core idea is pretty grounded. He means it's rooted in our ability to do these three key things, things that kind of build on each other: collaborative innovation,
Uh-huh.
voluntary exchange, and specialization. And the book, drawing on the analysis, pulls from economics, biology, history, all over, really.
To show these aren't just like abstract concepts.
Exactly, to show they are the real engines driving change.
Okay, so it's less about lone geniuses and more about people actually, working together, trading things.
That's a huge part of it. And one of the biggest drivers, according to the analysis, is what Ridley calls exchange as a motor.
Exchange as a motor, like trade.
Yeah, trade. Simple barter, using money, complex global markets. The point isn't just getting stuff you need. The real magic, he argues, is that it enables specialization.
Ah, right. Because if I can trade my, say, widgets for your gadgets, neither of us has to do everything. We can focus.
Precisely. You get really good at widgets, I get good at gadgets, and we trade. That simple act lets knowledge pile up, lets skills deepen.
It creates this positive feedback loop.
You got it. Allows knowledge to accumulate, complex societies to emerge.
That makes intuitive sense. Does the analysis mention any, specific historical examples?
It does, yeah. It contrasts societies that were big on trade. Think the ancient Phoenicians, they saw pretty rapid advancement for their time,
Okay,
versus societies that stayed isolated, which tended to, well, stagnate more.
right.
And a really interesting point the analysis brings up is about the Industrial Revolution. Ridley suggests it wasn't just some sudden fluke in Britain, no. It happened because these global exchange networks were already in place. Ideas, resources, they could flow.
Wow, okay. That really reframes it. It wasn't just coal and steam engines in isolation.
Not at all. And then there's that other famous phrase he uses for innovation. A bit cheeky.
Oh, yeah. Ideas having sex. Right.
That's the one.
What's the actual point behind that metaphor?
He uses it to illustrate that most innovation isn't, conjured out of nothing. It's usually about combining existing ideas in new ways.
Like Lego bricks.
Kind of, yeah. The analysis gives the example of, say, the telephone and the radio. Separate things, right? But eventually their DNA combines and you get the mobile phone. It's all about that cross-pollination.
Okay, mixing and matching. And for that kind of mixing to happen effectively, you need the right conditions.
Absolutely. The analysis really emphasizes the importance the book places on freedom, on open societies.
Openness is key.
Crucial. Societies that allow experimentation, that tolerate dissent, that let ideas flow across borders and social classes, they just tend to innovate faster.
Any examples there?
The analysis mentions 17th century Netherlands, relatively open for its time, lots of trade, and boom, a burst of scientific and commercial activity.
Gotcha. So the basic picture is exchange and innovation, happening best in open societies, drive progress forward.
That's the foundation of his argument, yeah.
Okay, now, you mentioned he really pushes back against pessimism. He goes after some historical doomsaying pretty hard, doesn't he?
Oh, definitely. A big chunk of the book, as the analysis summarizes it, is dedicated to dismantling the Malthusian fallacy.
Malthus. That's the idea that population growth is basically a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah.
Too many people, not enough food.
Exactly. That old fear, echoed more recently by people like Paul Ehrlich and the population bomb, this idea that we're doomed to outstrip our resources.
It's a powerful narrative. You still hear echoes of it today. But Ridley says the data just doesn't back it up.
Not at all. The analysis highlights this key point Wrigley makes. Look at the last couple of centuries. Global population exploded, right? But extreme poverty didn't follow suit. It actually plummeted dramatically.
Even with billions more people.
Even with billions more. The analysis even mentions those striking visuals like the ones Hans Rosling used to show this stuff. The world got much, much richer as it got more populous. Completely turns Malthus on his head.
Wow. Okay, that's a strong counterargument. But what about the really pressing concerns now, like climate change, other environmental issues? Does his optimism stretch that far?
It does. The analysis notes Ridley absolutely acknowledges these problems are real. He's not dismissing them, but his core optimism holds. He expresses real confidence that human ingenuity, that same engine of exchange and innovation, will find the technological fixes we need.
So we'll innovate our way out of it. What kinds of solutions is he banking on, according to the analysis?
The analysis points to a few things Ridley discusses. Advances in clean energy, for instance, like maybe fusion power down the line, or much cheaper, better solar.
Okay. What else?
Things like precision agriculture, GMOs, gene editing ways to grow more food, using less land, less water.
Right, making farming more efficient.
Exactly. And also, he tends to favor market-based approaches. Things like carbon markets, or maybe even privatizing some resources to incentivize people to manage them better.
So the same force as innovation, markets that solved past problems will solve future ones, like climate change.
That's very much the perspective the analysis presents from the book, and interestingly, this ties right back into his skepticism about too much regulation.
Ah, okay. Why is he wary of regulation? What's the connection?
Well, the analysis explains his argument that overly heavy-handed bureaucracy, too much top-down control, can actually smother the very innovation we need to solve these big problems.
It gets in the way.
It can, yeah. He might point to something like, say, the resistance to GMOs in parts of Europe as an example. He'd argue that's blocking a potentially useful technology that could help with food security or sustainability.
So instead of central planning deciding everything.
He prefers more decentralized systems. The analysis mentions how he might contrast, say, state subsidies, which can be bureaucratic, maybe pick the wrong winners, with things like crowdfunding.
Where lots of smaller ideas get a shot.
Exactly. It reflects his general preference for voluntary, market-like mechanisms to sift through ideas and drive progress.
Okay, let's try and pull the threads together then. Based on the analysis, what are the main sort of conclusions Ridley wants readers to take away from his book?
The analysis boils it down pretty well. First main idea. Look at the big picture, the long arc of history. The trend for humanity is overwhelmingly positive. More wealth, better health, more opportunities for more people, generally speaking.
Despite bumps along the road.
Despite many bumps, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Second key point. This progress isn't random. It's mostly driven by voluntary cooperation. Things like markets, open science, people freely exchanging ideas and goods. He sees that as far superior to central planning.
Right. And wasn't there a warning in there, too? Something about pessimism itself?
Absolutely. The analysis highlights this caution he gives. Pessimism isn't just, a bad mood. It can actually be dangerous.
No, so.
Because if you genuinely believe the future is bleak, that we're doomed, you might end up supporting policies that block innovation. Technological prohibitionism, he calls it.
Stopping progress out of fear.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Preventing the very solutions that might actually save us or improve things.
So the message is kind of, don't let fear paralyze us from building a better future.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay. Now, of course, we always aim for balance here. The analysis we've been drawing on, it doesn't just present Ridley's arguments in isolation. It also brings in some really important challenges and criticisms.
Yeah, and this is where things get, let's say, more nuanced. The analysis kind of pivots here, asking, okay, where does this powerful optimism maybe need a reality check? It identifies several unsolved problems, areas the book might not fully address.
Like what? What are these problem areas?
Well, inequality is a big one mentioned. The analysis suggests that while Ridley is right about the huge drop in extreme poverty globally, maybe the book underplays the widening gap between the rich and the poor, both within countries and between them. Globalization's benefits haven't been shared equally, perhaps.
Okay. That's a common critique. What else?
Climate change again. While Ridley is optimistic about tech solutions, the analysis questions if relying just on tech breakthroughs is enough. Isn't coordinated global action, policy changes, also essential? Maybe tech alone is too passive a hope.
Right. Tech needs implementation, political will.
Precisely. And another area the analysis flags is ethics. All this rapid innovation, especially now with things like AI, genetic engineering, it throws up huge ethical questions, right? About privacy, control, fairness. The analysis suggests the book doesn't dive too deeply into those dilemmas.
So potential blind spots around distribution, collective action, and ethics. Does the analysis name specific critics or counter-arguments?
It does. It references Naomi Klein, for instance, and her arguments, particularly in This Changes Everything.
Ah, yes.
Klein directly challenges the idea that free markets, the very engine Ridley praises, can actually solve massive ecological crises like climate change. She argues the market system itself might be part of the problem.
Okay, that's a fundamental disagreement with Ridley's preferred solutions. Anyone else?
It also brings up Jared Diamond, famous for his book Collapse. Diamond's work focuses on historical examples of societies that, well, did collapse.
Despite being advanced for their time.
Often, yes. Societies that had ingenuity but still failed because they mismanaged their resources, degraded their environment, or couldn't adapt. That directly challenges the assumption that human innovation always finds a way out. Sometimes, historically, it hasn't.
Those are definitely significant counterpoints. They add necessary caution, I suppose. So after presenting Ridley's case and then these critiques, what's the overall assessment from the analysis? Where does it land?
The analysis basically concludes that Ridley's book is incredibly valuable, especially for understanding that long historical sweep, how cooperation and exchange helped us overcome scarcity time and again. It's a vital antidote to constant doom and gloom narrative.
Right.
But it argues that powerful historical optimism needs some significant caveats when looking forward. Radical optimism needs a qualification for today's complex challenges.
And that qualification comes back to institutions.
Exactly. The analysis really stresses this point. Innovation doesn't just happen magically. It happens within frameworks, within institutions. And if we want Ridley's optimism to actually pan out in a way that's fair and sustainable,
You need the right kind of institutions.
yes, institutions that don't just foster innovation, but also actively promote equity and environmental health alongside that progress. It's not automatic. It requires conscious design.
That feels like a really important takeaway. The human potential for progress is there, maybe rooted in exchange, like Ridley says, but actually achieving it responsibly depends on the choices we make about how we organize ourselves.
Well put. It's not just about what we can do, but what we choose to prioritize.
Okay, so we've journeyed through this analysis of Matt Ridley's rational optimism, seeing the powerful case built on exchange, innovation, and human ingenuity.
And then we've also explored those critical counterpoints raised in the analysis, the concerns about inequality, the urgency of climate action beyond just tech hopes, the ethical dimensions, and the historical reminders that progress isn't guaranteed.
It definitely gives you a much richer, more textured understanding than just taking the optimism or the pessimism at face value.
For sure.
And building on that final point from the analysis, that institutions are key not just for sparking innovation, but also for guiding it towards fairness and sustainability. That leads to a final thought for you, our listener, to mull over. Given the sheer complexity of the challenges we face, climate, inequality, pandemics, AI, ethics, you name it, what kind of institutional frameworks, what kind of rules and organizations do you think are best suited to help us navigate this future? How do we best harness that human spark of innovation while also making sure the benefits are shared widely and we don't undermine the planet we depend on? Something to think about.